In chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, Mishnah number 13, the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon says, Shleisha Chesarim Heim, there are 3 types of crowns, and they are Keser Torah, the crown of Torah, V'cheser Kuhuna, the crown of Kuhuna, V'cheser Malchus, and the crown of kingship. And then the Mishnah goes on to say, V'cheser Shem Tov, however, the crown of a good name, Oila al Gabehen, goes above upon them. And the question comes to mind, why does the Mishnah begin by saying there are 3 crowns? And then the Mishnah goes on to actually enumerate 4 crowns. So if there are 4 crowns, we should say, Rabbi Shimon said there are 4 crowns. And yet we find that Rabbi Shimon says there are 3 crowns. And then it goes on to say the 4th crown is Keser Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. To understand this on Pshat and Remez, Drush, Soid, and Chassidus, and to also connect this to the sayer of the saying, which is Rabbi Shimon. On the level of Pshat, the Bartanura, who comments on this Mishnah, says that we find in the Torah there are 3 people that have to be honored. One is the crown of Torah, one is the crown of Kuhuna, one is the crown of Malchus. And that is a Torah scholar, one who studies Torah, and one who is knowledgeable in Torah, a great chacham, a great leader, a great rabbi. When a person like that walks into a room, you have to stand up, and that person deserves your respect. That is called Keser Torah. And then you have the Keser Kuhuna, the crown of the Kohen. And that is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch that says that when it comes to the reading of the Torah, you call up 7 people on Shabbos. Who is the first person to be called up? The first person to be called up is a Kohen, because a Kohen deserves respect. The Kohen has the Keser Kuhuna, the crown of the Kuhuna. And the same is true when it comes to grace after meals. It says if there's a Kohen there, then the Kohen shall lead the benching. The 3rd person is a king, as the Torah says, Seim Tosem Alecha Melech, you shall place a king upon you. And therefore you have to respect the king. We know that according to the Talmud, if a person blinks while he's standing before a king, he winks with his eye to somebody else, he deserves to be put to death. That is the honor and respect that one has to give a king. And that is called Keser Malchus, the crown of kingship. And then the Mishnah goes on to say, there's also another crown that's called the crown of a good name. However, this crown is not called one of the 4 crowns, because in the Torah we don't find a specific commandment or obligation to honor somebody with a good name. Rather, this 4th crown is an extension of the previous 3. In other words, in order for a rabbi or a great Torah leader to earn respect, in addition to his Torah knowledge, he also has to have a good name. Because if he is an animal, if he's disrespectful to others, he doesn't earn the respect of a Torah scholar. Similarly, a Kohen is someone who should be called first to the Torah. He's also one that in the time of the temple would receive the truma, the tithe from the people, the challah from the people. But if he was not liked by the people, you did not give him your challah. You did not give him your truma. You find another Kohen to give it to. So therefore, both the Torah scholar and the Kohen need Shem Tov. They need a good name to have the Keser, to have the crown. And the same is true with Malchus. The same is true with kingship. If the king wants to truly be honored and liked by the people, then he has to have a Shem Tov. He has to have a good name. He has to help the people. and teach the people and give them jobs and give them housing and security, etc., etc. So that is the concept of Shloisha Kesarim. There are 3 crowns that in the Torah mentions that you need to respect these 3 types of people. And however, the Mishnah comes along and says that there is a 4th one which really describes and which validates the first 3, and that is Shem Tov, by having a good name. What is the remez? What is the hint? As we spoke many times, that the idea of remez, the hint, represents to the future, to the coming of Mashiach. How do we see that this Mishnah alludes to the coming of Mashiach? Here the Mishnah tells us that there are 3 things that one should do to bring about the coming of Mashiach. Even though in essence every mitzvah that a person does with a good intention can bring about the coming of Mashiach. As the Rambam says, a person should always view the world on a scale of 50% good deeds and 50% bad deeds. And one good deed can turn the scale to salvation. So really, every mitzvah you do, that could be the one deed that brings about Mashiach. But yet, there are 3 specific areas where one should focus. The first one is Torah. And that is not only to learn Torah in general, but to learn the Torah pertaining to Inyonei Geula u'Mashiach. To learn the Torah that deals with the concepts of redemption and the concepts of Mashiach. And when a person does that, he acquires Keser Torah. He acquires the crown of Torah. Furthermore, Kuhuna, what is Kuhuna? We know that Aaron HaKohen, the high priest, what was his unique quality? Says the ethics of our fathers, Oyev Shalom. He loved peace and pursued peace. And he brought people close to God and close to Torah. And therefore, by acting in the ways of Aaron, by emulating this quality of brotherly love, unconditional love for our fellow Jew, and simply to love him because he's a Jew, this will bring about the coming of Mashiach. Number 3, which is Malchus, kingship. King David was called David Malka Mashiach, the King David the Messiah. In other words, the crown of kingship is by the fact that a Jew has a yearning and a desire that Mashiach should come. As we say every day, Ani Mamin, I believe with complete faith in the coming of Mashiach. And not only that, he prays in the Amidah, Semach David Avdecha Meheretz Atzmiach, that the sign of David should sprout swiftly. And when he says, V'sachazenu einenu, our eyes should see, B'shuvcha l'tzion berachamim, when the Shekhinah returns to Zion with mercy, he actually visualizes in his eyes that the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem. This is the fastest way to bring about the coming of Mashiach. These 3 things, the study of Torah, of Mashiach, and to love your fellow Jew, and to add to your prayers, to requests of God to bring about the redemption, this will bring about the Shem Tov, the good name, which is Oila Gabein. What is the good name? That is Mashiach. Therefore, Mashiach is not one of the 3 crowns. Rather, Mashiach is the result of the 3 crowns. How do we see that Shem Tov, a good name, is Mashiach? It's very simple. The gematria of Mashiach is the same as Shem Tov. Now, you might be smart and actually add it up. And you say, hold on, if I add it up, Mashiach is 358. But Shem Tov is only 357. So where is Mashiach equal to Shem Tov? So we know that in Kabbalah, and we know that in Gematria, the word itself is 1. It's called the Shem HaKoilel. So you really have 357 plus 1, which is 358. But in truth, it's even more than that. And that is, we know the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. And that is that every single Jew has a Mashiach in themselves. And our job is to activate that Mashiach. And therefore, when we have 357 plus 1 plus you, then we have Mashiach. In other words, by the fact that we study Torah, and we love a fellow Jew, and we pray for Mashiach, this will activate our personal Mashiach, which will therefore bring about the ultimate Mashiach, and therefore we will have Shem Tov, the good name, which is Mashiach himself. What is the Roush? How do we understand this Mishnah on a level of homiletics? To begin with, an interesting perspective. When we go to the synagogue and the Torah is taken out of the ark, many Torahs, in addition to the mantle, to the actual garment that goes on the Torah, you also adorn the Torah with ornaments. What do you have? You have a crown, and you have a breastplate, and you have a pointer. These are the three major ornaments that one beautifies the Torah with. And for a long time I tried to understand why these three things are put on the Torah. But really the answer is found here in the Mishnah. And that is that our synagogue today is really a miniature temple. And therefore in our synagogue we try to emulate the Holy Temple. In the Holy Temple there were three vessels that had a crown around them. The ark, the golden altar, and the table, the tabernacle of the showbread. And these three vessels in the temple had the crown. Our rabbis tell us that the crown around the Aron, the ark, alludes to Keser Torah, the crown of Torah. The crown around the altar represents the crown of the Kohuna, of the Kohen. And the crown around the table represents the crown of kingship. Because, as we have the expression, a table fit for a king. And therefore these three crowns are superimposed in these three ornaments that we put on the Torah scroll. We have the Keser, the crown on the top, which represents the crown of the Torah. Then we have the breastplate, which was worn by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, alluding to the crown of Kohuna. And then we have the crown of kingship, which is the pointer. What is the power of the king? The power of the king is in the scepter. The power of the king is in his pointing. He commands you what to do. He says, do this and not to do that. So these three things allude to the three crowns here in the Mishnah. What then is Keser Shem Tov, the crown of a good name? This is the living person. This is the person that carries out the Torah. The Torah cannot speak, and the Torah has no legs, and the Torah cannot talk. So when we take the Torah from the ark, that is embellished with the crown, and with the breastplate, and with the pointer, and then we open it up, and we read from the Torah. We make the Torah a living Torah. And then we follow the Torah by lighting the Shabbos candles and making a bracha before we eat and eating kosher and putting on the tefillin. Now we become the Shem Tov, we become the good name. Because a name is something that you call for somebody else. If I was the only person in the world, technically I did not need a name. A name is for somebody else, to call somebody else. So therefore the good name is that we express the Torah in our daily life. And that becomes Oila Gabeya, and that is even greater than the Torah itself. Then we have Soid. What is the Soid, the esoteric? We have three crowns. The crown of Torah, the crown of Kohuna, and the crown of Malchus. The Tzemach Tzedek writes that the crown of Torah alludes to the attribute of Chokhmah, intellect. It says, Oiraisa mechokhmah nafkis, that the Torah comes from God's attribute of intellect. So that's the crown of Torah. The crown of Kohuna alludes to the 6 emotional attributes, the 6 emotional supernal attributes, which is called Zah, and the first of those 6 is chesed, kindness. And the Kohen is known to be a man of kindness. That is the crown of Kahuna. The crown of Malchus literally alludes to Keser Malchus, which means the attribute of Malchus, the 10th of the attributes. So these are the 3 crowns that the Mishnah talks about, which alludes to the 10 primary supernal attributes of God. Yet, we have Keser Shem Toiv, and the crown of a good name goes upon them, or rather stands on them. What is that? That represents the actual performance of the mitzvah. Because the quality of a mitzvah and the root of a mitzvah comes from a higher place than Torah itself. And that comes from the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation. And in that world of emanation, the crown of Atzilus, in the level of Arich Anpin, the long face, that is where God's desire for us to do the mitzvahs come from. So, Shem Tov, the good name, represents fulfilling God's ratzon, God's will, and a person's will is beyond his intellect. And that is why it's not counted amongst the 3 crowns, because it's incomparable. The 3 crowns are within the lower worlds, in Bria and Yetzirah and Asiyah, the world of creation and formation and action. However, the crown of a good name is so much greater that it cannot be put into that category of the 3 crowns. Rather, it's in a zone and a category of its own. This is what we find in Kabbalah. What does Chassidus say about this? We find that the Rebbe spoke on this Mishnah numerous times, and to try to bring it all together. The Rebbe asks a few questions on the Mishnah. The Mishnah starts off by saying there are 3 crowns, and then it ends off by enumerating 4 crowns. So why not simply say there are 4 crowns? Number 2, what is the terminology, the 4th crown, Oila al Gabehen, which literally means it stands upon them. It's a very unusual terminology. The more traditional term in the Talmud would be L'mayla Mekulam, is above the rest. The 4th crown is above the others. But why does it say Oila Gabehen as if it's standing on the other 3 crowns? Number 3 is we say the good name is the better crown. Shem Tov Oila Gabehen. How can you say that a good name is better than one who's a Torah scholar? How can you say a good name is someone who is greater than a king? How can you say a good name is something which is higher than the high priest? Why? Because it's possible that you have a good name, you have a good reputation, but it's really based on nothing. Once they get to know you, you no longer have the good name. It's only a reputation. But when you go to the person and you ask for a favor, the guy runs the other way. So why is it that simply by having a good name, a good reputation, is that considered to be greater than one who dedicates his life to Torah study, or a king who dedicates his life to helping his country, or a Kohen who dedicates his life to bringing spirituality to his people? And of course, what is the connection to the Seir of the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Shimon? And the Rebbe goes on to explain that the concept of these 3 crowns, and we're going to go from lower to higher. We start with Malchus. The lowest is kingship. What does kingship mean? That a Jew accepts upon himself the yoke of God. Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shemayim. You accept the kingship of heaven upon yourself. The problem is, even though you accept the kingship of heaven, the problem is that it's like to you a yoke. A yoke is something you don't want on your shoulders. You are reluctantly going to commit to do it. You're going to agree to follow the Torah, but you would rather do something else. That's Malchus. Then you have Kahuna, the crown of the Kohen. What is the Kohen? The high priest goes into the Holy of Holies. And there he becomes one with God. And in the Holy of Holies, you have the tablets, the luchot. And on those luchot, you have the Ten Commandments engraved. The letters and the actual tablets are one, implying that you and God become one, that you derive pleasure from connecting with God. This is the second level. The first is you accept the yoke, and now you accept to have pleasure from the mitzvah as well. But the problem with these two qualities is that's a very superficial or an all-encompassing peripheral level. Because where exactly in your body is your will? I can tell you where your eyeball is, I can tell you where your hearing is, I can tell you where your nose is, but where exactly is your will found? It's all over. Where exactly is your pleasure found? Well, you can have pleasure from smelling something, you can have pleasure from eating something, you can have pleasure from hearing something. So where is the pleasure found? So therefore we have to take this external quality and make it more internal. And that is the quality of Torah, Keser Torah. And that is intellect. So you have now three levels. You have first yoke, and then you have pleasure, and then you have intellect. The yoke is, I accept to follow the laws of Shabbos. I agree, I commit that for the next 24 hours I will not do work, but I am reluctant to do it. A higher level is, I want to have the pleasure of Shabbos. So I'm going to eat, I'm going to drink, I'm going to make l'chaim, I'm going to have good food, I'm going to really feel the pleasure of Shabbos. So I'm committed to having pleasure also. In order for me to understand, to have real pleasure and to accept the yoke of Shabbos, I have to learn the laws of Shabbos, because how could I do Shabbos without knowing what to do? So I sit down, I open up the tractate of Shabbos, I learn the laws of Shabbos, I open up a Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishnah Brura, and I go through the laws, and now I know what to do on Shabbos. So I agreed, I want to have pleasure, and I know the laws. There's one problem. You did not actually do it yet. You agreed to do it, you want to do it, you know what you have to do, you're meditating on it. However, you did not actually come to light the Shabbos candles. You did not come to have the Shabbos meal. You did not go to pray on Shabbos. You don't have the fourth crown. And therefore, the fourth crown is Shem Tov, a good name, which is the action, the Maisa Mitzvah. And therefore, Oila Gabehen, it's a crown that stands upon the others. When does the mitzvah become a crown? Only when you have the intent, only when you have the knowledge, only when you have the drive, only when you have the understanding. Now, when I do the mitzvah is rich, the mitzvah is beautiful, the mitzvah is exalting. But if I simply do the mitzvah alone, I run down the street, there's a mitzvah tank standing there, the guy says to me, are you Jewish? I say, yeah. Before I have a chance, he pulls off my jacket, he puts on the tefillin. I did a mitzvah. Did I do a mitzvah? Yes, I did a mitzvah. I connected myself with God's will, with Ratzon Hashem, with the world of Atzilus. It's the highest level. However, the mitzvah is really a body without a soul, because I had no intention, I had no desire, I had no drive. So the most important thing is the mitzvah, Ma'aseh hu Ikar. But when does the mitzvah become a crown? Only al gabehen, when it stands upon the other three crowns of the desire, of the pleasure, and of the knowledge. And therefore it's important before a holiday, 30 days before the holiday, to take out the Code of Jewish Law, to learn the laws, and to take out Maimer Chassidus, and to study the mystical aspects of the holiday. And then to actually go prepare yourself by going to the store and buying matzah before Pesach, and cheesecake before Shavuos, and donuts before Hanukkah, so you could truly have the pleasure of each holiday. But simply having the intent, I want to do it, and I have pleasure if I did it, and I know what to do, that alone does not fulfill the mitzvah. That is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is Shem Tov, a good name, which means what? To bring light into the world. Tov is light. When God created light, He said it's good. And Shem is a name for others. I don't do it for myself. Because the ultimate level is to surrender yourself and give yourself away to somebody else. Is to nullify your own existence. The first three levels of intellect and pleasure and yoke, it's me, it's I. It's the capital I in America. I decided I will follow God. I decided I want to have pleasure being a Jew. I decided that I know what I have to do. It's the I. So even though the I is doing a good thing, it's a holy I, instead of an unholy I, it's still an I, it's still ego. When do I fulfill my ultimate purpose in this world? When I create a dwelling place for God. When I make the world a brighter place. When I think about someone else first. When the I becomes small and the you becomes big. Then I fulfill my purpose here in this world. Then Shem Tov Oila Gabein now becomes the greatest of all the crowns. And this concept is connected with the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Gemara tells us in the Tractate of Shabbos on page 33, side B, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son ran into a cave. He ran into a cave because the Romans wanted to kill him. So for 12 years he sat in the cave. And the Talmud says there a miracle happened, that a brook of water went into the cave, and he drank from that water every day. And a carob tree grew from where he was able to eat and sustain himself for 12 years. At the end of 12 years, Elijah the prophet came to the door of the cave and said, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and your son, you can leave the cave, for the Caesar, the Caesar, has died, and therefore the death warrant is no longer on your neck. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came out of the cave together with his son, and they saw a man in the field, and the man was plowing and sowing the field, and Rabbi Shimon could not tolerate that person. He had zero tolerance, and there was a clash between the physical and the spiritual. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son for the last 12 years was totally involved with spirituality. And here he sees a Jew who's preoccupied with the physical, everyday earth, the materialistic, finite, physical world. And he calls out and he says, how can you give up eternal life for temporary life? How can you give up Chaye Olam, the life of eternality, for Chaye Shah, for the life of 1 hour? And the Talmud says, he looked at him and he burnt him alive. And wherever he began to look, his eyes began to burn that place. And a heavenly voice came out and said, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, did I allow you to leave my cave to destroy my world? Go back into the cave. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai goes back into the cave with his son for another year. And after a year he comes out of the cave. And now the Talmud says, whatever his son destroyed, he repaired and he healed. His son was not able to tolerate it yet. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was able to fuse these two worlds together. He now had tolerance. Now this concept that Rebbe goes on to explain is the difference between the number 12 and the number 13. 12 represents the pattern of nature. It represents limitation. Like the 12 tribes, or the 12 months of the year, or in Kabbalah, the 12 lines of Gvulei Alachsoin. Some say this alludes to the 12 lines in a Magen David. So this concept represents the laws of nature. 13 is beyond nature. The gematria of 13 is Echad, 1. To unify heaven and earth. To unify beyond nature within nature, to unify the infinity in the finitude. That is the concept of 13. And therefore, in the 13th year, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had the ability to bring these two things together. And that is why we find, says the Rebbe, that the Mishnah that teaches us this teaching is Mishnah number 13. It's Mishnah 13. Mishnah, on one hand, means Shana, means year, which is a limitation of 12 months. Yet it's 13, because it's taking the level beyond nature within nature. And this is all connected with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because on one hand, Rabbi Shimon was a person who teirasai menasai. His entire preoccupation was the study of Torah, was spirituality. He was totally aloof from the world. And therefore he comes along and says that is not the correct pattern. That is not the correct approach to life. Yes, you have to study Torah, but you have to tolerate others. You have to seek godliness within the physical finite. That is the ultimate challenge. That is the ultimate goal. And therefore he turns to his son and he says, it's enough that I and you should sustain the entire world. The fact that I and you study Torah, and we have the preoccupation of Torah, we could sustain the entire world even though they are preoccupied with a temporary world, with the physicality of the world. And on the contrary, we have the ability to infuse their 1 hour of Torah a day or their 1 hour Torah a week with our unlimited study of the Torah. And that is the idea of 13, to unify us and them together. And this concept is studied between Passover and Shavuos, and again is studied between Shavuos and the summer months, to remind us that even though throughout the summer perhaps a person takes a vacation and they go and they become a bit more relaxed, at the same time there's no vacation from the study of Torah, and you can't relax yourself from the performance of mitzvahs. On the contrary, wherever you find yourself, in the field, in the country, on vacation, you have the ability of echad, of 13, to bring the knowledge of Torah and the knowledge of God into those places and to reveal the goodness and the kindness in the world. And we hope and pray to see a world of truth and a world of unity, when once again the entire world will see the oneness of God with the coming of Mashiach, who is called Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. B'mheira b'meinu, amen.